In the bustling streets of Saratoga Springs, New York, Solomon Northup was a man of stature and freedom. A skilled violinist, a loving husband, and a doting father, his life was filled with the simple joys of family and music. But beneath the veneer of prosperity lay the simmering tensions of a nation torn apart by the specter of slavery. As Solomon walked the familiar streets of his hometown, he could feel the weight of history bearing down upon him. The whispers of oppression echoed in the wind, and the shadows of injustice danced at the edges of his vision. Yet, in spite of the dangers that lurked in the darkness, Solomon remained steadfast in his belief in the promise of freedom. Little did he know that his world was about to be turned upside down. It was a crisp autumn morning when Solomon's life took a drastic turn. As he made his way to the local market, his mind filled with thoughts of the day ahead, he was accosted by a group of men whose faces were twisted with malice. Before he could react, strong hands seized him, binding his arms and muffling his cries with rough cloth. Panic surged through him as he struggled against his captors, but their grip was unrelenting. In a matter of moments, Solomon's world was reduced to darkness and chaos. When he awoke, disoriented and disheveled, Solomon found himself chained and bound in the hold of a ship. The stench of sweat and fear hung heavy in the air, mingling with the groans of despair from those around him. It was then that the horrifying truth dawned upon him: he had been kidnapped and sold into slavery. For days, Solomon endured the agonizing journey southward, his thoughts consumed by fear and uncertainty. Memories of his family and his former life provided the only solace in the face of overwhelming despair. But even as he grappled with the harsh realities of his captivity, a flicker of determination ignited within him. As the ship docked in the bustling port city of New Orleans, Solomon braced himself for the trials that lay ahead. Little did he know that his journey into the heart of darkness was only just beginning. Emerging from the suffocating confines of the ship, Solomon found himself thrust into a world that bore no resemblance to the one he had known. The sights and sounds of New Orleans assaulted his senses, a cacophony of unfamiliar faces and languages swirling around him. Sold to a ruthless slave trader, Solomon was stripped of his name, his dignity, and his humanity. Branded like cattle and subjected to the cruel whims of his new masters, he found himself grappling with a profound sense of loss. Gone was the man who had walked the streets of Saratoga Springs with pride and purpose. In his place stood a mere shadow of his former self, a commodity to be bought and sold at will. Yet, even in the darkest depths of despair, a spark of defiance flickered within Solomon's soul. Refusing to surrender to the dehumanizing forces that sought to crush him, he clung to the memories of his past, drawing strength from the love of his family and the music that had once been his salvation. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Solomon's resilience was put to the test. Forced to toil under the scorching sun of the Louisiana plantation, he endured backbreaking labor and brutal punishment with stoic determination. But beneath the mask of submission, a simmering anger simmered, a fire that threatened to consume him from within. In the oppressive heat of the Deep South, Solomon found himself engaged in a battle not just for survival, but for his very identity. Haunted by the specter of his past and the uncertainty of his future, he struggled to reconcile the man he once was with the slave he had become. And yet, even as he grappled with the crushing weight of oppression, a glimmer of hope remained, a beacon of light in the darkness that threatened to engulf him. As the days stretched into weeks and the weeks into months, Solomon's existence became a relentless cycle of toil and torment. Shackled by chains of oppression, he labored from dawn until dusk under the blistering sun, his body battered and bruised, his spirit all but broken. The plantation where Solomon found himself enslaved was a world unto itself, ruled by cruelty and caprice. Overseen by a sadistic master and his equally merciless overseers, it was a place where the lash reigned supreme and mercy was but a distant memory. Yet, amidst the brutality and despair, Solomon refused to surrender to despair. With each passing day, he clung to the flickering ember of hope that burned within him, a stubborn refusal to relinquish his humanity in the face of overwhelming adversity. But as the years wore on and the chains of bondage tightened their grip, Solomon found himself teetering on the brink of despair. The dream of freedom that had sustained him through the darkest of days seemed increasingly elusive, a distant mirage shimmering on the horizon. And yet, even in the depths of despair, Solomon refused to abandon hope. For deep within his soul, he knew that as long as he drew breath, there remained the possibility of redemption, the chance to break free from the chains that bound him and reclaim his stolen humanity. Solomon's life as a slave took a drastic turn when he was auctioned off to a new master. Standing on the auction block, stripped of all dignity, he watched as potential buyers inspected him like a piece of livestock. Each bid felt like a blow to his already wounded spirit, a stark reminder of his reduced status in this world. Finally, a bid was accepted, and Solomon was sold once again, his fate now in the hands of a new master. As he was led away to his new home, he couldn't help but wonder what awaited him in this unfamiliar territory. Under his new master's roof, Solomon found himself facing a different kind of oppression. While the physical labor may have been less grueling, the psychological toll was just as heavy. He was subjected to constant humiliation and degradation, his sense of self-worth eroded with each passing day. But amidst the darkness, there were moments of light. Solomon forged unexpected connections with fellow slaves, finding solace in shared suffering and camaraderie. Together, they clung to the hope that one day they might taste freedom once again. As the years passed, Solomon's resilience was put to the test once more. But through it all, he remained determined to hold on to his humanity, refusing to let the cruelty of his circumstances extinguish the fire within him. Solomon's journey into the heart of darkness took him deeper into the belly of the beast. Sold to a plantation owner known for his brutality, he found himself plunged into a world of unspeakable cruelty and suffering. Under the watchful eye of his new master, Solomon was subjected to relentless abuse and exploitation. Every day brought fresh horrors, as he toiled under the scorching sun, his body weary and broken, his spirit on the verge of collapse. But even in the darkest depths of despair, Solomon refused to surrender to hopelessness. With each passing day, he drew strength from the memories of his family and the dreams of freedom that sustained him through the long, lonely nights. Yet, as the years wore on and the horrors of slavery threatened to consume him, Solomon found himself grappling with doubt and uncertainty. Was redemption truly possible in a world so steeped in darkness? Or was he doomed to spend the rest of his days in bondage, a mere shadow of the man he once was? As he wrestled with these questions, Solomon found himself embarking on a journey of self-discovery. Through the trials and tribulations of slavery, he began to uncover the depths of his own resilience and the power of the human spirit to endure, even in the face of unimaginable adversity. In the crucible of slavery, Solomon learned the art of survival amidst unrelenting cruelty. Each day brought with it new challenges, new trials to overcome as he fought to retain his humanity in a world hell-bent on stripping it away. Yet, amidst the brutality and degradation, Solomon discovered a strength within himself that he never knew existed. With each lash of the whip, each harsh word spoken in anger, he grew more resilient, more determined to defy the forces that sought to break him, but survival came at a cost. Solomon was forced to harden his heart, to steel himself against the pain and suffering that surrounded him. Gone was the carefree spirit of his youth, replaced by a steely resolve to endure, no matter the cost. Yet, amidst the darkness, there were moments of light. Acts of kindness, small though they may have been, served as beacons of hope in the vast expanse of despair. And in the company of his fellow slaves, Solomon found solace and strength, drawing courage from their shared struggle. As the years passed, Solomon's resilience was put to the test time and time again. But through it all, he refused to lose sight of the flickering flame of hope that burned within him, a beacon of light in the darkest of nights. Amidst the harsh landscape of slavery, Solomon found solace in the unlikeliest of places, the bonds of friendship that he forged with his fellow slaves. In the crucible of suffering, these connections became lifelines, sustaining him through the darkest of days. Together, they shared their stories, their hopes, and their dreams, finding strength in their shared humanity. In each other's company, they found refuge from the cruelty that surrounded them, drawing courage from the knowledge that they were not alone in their struggle, but friendship came with its own risks. In a world where trust was a rare and precious commodity, betrayal lurked around every corner. Yet, despite the dangers, Solomon refused to let fear dictate his actions. For in the company of his friends, he found a sense of belonging that he had thought lost forever. As the years passed, Solomon's bond with his fellow slaves grew stronger, transcending the barriers of race and class that sought to divide them. Together, they weathered the storms of oppression, their spirits unbroken, their hope undimmed, and in the darkest of nights, when despair threatened to consume them, it was the light of friendship that illuminated their path, guiding them ever closer to the promise of freedom that lay on the horizon. As the years dragged on, Solomon's dreams of liberation burned ever brighter. Locked in the chains of slavery, he clung to the hope that one day he would taste freedom once again, that the shackles that bound him would be cast aside and he would reclaim his stolen dignity. With each passing day, the longing for freedom grew stronger, a relentless drumbeat in the depths of his soul. He imagined the feel of the sun on his face, the taste of the cool, fresh air, the sound of his children's laughter ringing in his ears. And with each passing day, the dream felt more tangible, more within reach. Yet, for all his longing, Solomon knew that freedom would not come easily. The path to liberation was fraught with danger, lined with obstacles that threatened to dash his hopes to pieces. But even in the face of such daunting odds, he refused to surrender to despair. For deep within his heart, he knew that as long as he drew breath, there remained the possibility of redemption, the chance to break free from the chains that bound him and reclaim his stolen humanity. And so, with unwavering determination, Solomon embarked on a journey of defiance, a quest for freedom that would take him to the very edge of despair and back again. For he knew that no matter the cost, no matter the sacrifice, he would stop at nothing to secure his liberty and that of his fellow slaves. As the flames of discontent smoldered beneath the surface, Solomon found himself drawn into a dangerous game of rebellion. Fueled by the fire of defiance that burned within him, he began to plot a daring escape, a bid for freedom that would test the limits of his courage and resolve. Gathering his fellow slaves in secret, Solomon outlined his plan with a sense of urgency born of desperation. They would wait for the cover of darkness, then slip away into the night, leaving behind the chains of bondage and forging a path to freedom. But freedom came at a price. As they made their escape under the cover of darkness, they were pursued by the hounds of their oppressors, their every step fraught with danger. Yet, despite the risks, Solomon and his companions pressed onward, driven by the promise of a better life beyond the horizon. As they navigated the treacherous terrain of the Deep South, Solomon's resolve was put to the test as never before. With each passing mile, the weight of their pursuit grew heavier, threatening to crush their hopes beneath its relentless weight. But even in the face of overwhelming odds, Solomon refused to surrender to despair. For he knew that the price of freedom was steep, but the reward was priceless, the chance to live a life of dignity and self-determination, free from the chains of oppression that had bound him for so long. And so, with every fiber of his being, he pressed onward, his eyes fixed firmly on the horizon, his heart filled with hope for a brighter tomorrow. As Solomon and his companions pressed on through the night, their spirits buoyed by the faint glimmer of hope on the horizon, they stumbled upon an unexpected oasis in the midst of the wilderness. Hidden away from prying eyes, nestled deep within the heart of the forest, lay a sanctuary of sorts, a community of free men and women who had dared to defy the shackles of oppression and carve out a life of freedom in the wilderness. Welcomed with open arms by their newfound brethren, Solomon and his companions found refuge from the storm that raged outside. Here, amidst the towering trees and the gentle whisper of the wind, they found a sense of peace that had long eluded them. But even as they reveled in the warmth of their newfound sanctuary, Solomon knew that their journey was far from over. For though they had escaped the chains of slavery, the specter of oppression still loomed large on the horizon, a reminder of the dangers that lay ahead. And so, with renewed determination, Solomon and his companions vowed to continue their journey, to press onward until they reached the promised land of freedom that beckoned them from afar. For they knew that no matter the obstacles they faced, no matter the trials that lay ahead, they would never stop fighting for the chance to live a life of dignity and self-determination, free from the bonds of oppression that had held them captive for far too long. As Solomon and his companions journeyed ever closer to the elusive promise of freedom, they encountered a betrayal that shook them to their core. In the dead of night, as they rested beneath the canopy of stars, they were ambushed by a band of bounty hunters, their sanctuary shattered by the cruel hand of fate. Bound and gagged, Solomon and his companions were dragged back into the clutches of their oppressors, their dreams of liberation dashed upon the rocks of betrayal. For weeks, they languished in captivity, their spirits broken, their hopes all but extinguished. But even in the darkest depths of despair, Solomon refused to surrender to hopelessness. For he knew that redemption lay within reach, if only he could summon the strength to seize it. And so, with a steely resolve born of desperation, Solomon began to plot his escape once more. Drawing upon every ounce of cunning and resourcefulness at his disposal, he crafted a daring plan that would see him break free from the chains of bondage once and for all. As the day of reckoning dawned, Solomon and his companions seized their chance, striking out into the wilderness under the cover of darkness. With each step, they drew closer to the elusive promise of freedom, their hearts filled with a renewed sense of hope and determination. And though the road ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty, Solomon knew that as long as he drew breath, he would never stop fighting for the chance to reclaim his stolen dignity and live a life of freedom, free from the shackles of oppression that had held him captive for far too long. With their escape from captivity, Solomon and his companions embarked on a perilous journey towards freedom. Every step was fraught with danger, every shadow held the threat of capture and return to the horrors they had fled. They traversed dense forests and treacherous swamps, guided only by the light of the North Star and the hope that burned bright within their hearts. Each passing day brought new challenges. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, exhaustion weighed heavy on their limbs, and the ever-present fear of discovery haunted their every move. But despite the dangers that lurked around every corner, Solomon and his companions pressed on, their determination unyielding, their resolve unwavering. For they knew that the price of freedom was steep, but the rewards were worth every sacrifice. As they journeyed northward, they encountered kindred spirits who offered them shelter and sustenance, their generosity a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. And though their road was long and fraught with peril, Solomon and his companions drew strength from the bonds of friendship that bound them together, knowing that together they were stronger than they could ever be alone. And so, with each passing mile, they edged ever closer to the elusive promise of freedom that beckoned them from afar, their hearts filled with hope and their spirits ablaze with the fire of defiance. For they knew that no matter the obstacles they faced, no matter the trials that lay ahead, they would never stop fighting for the chance to live a life of dignity and self-determination, free from the chains of oppression that had bound them for far too long. As Solomon and his companions pressed onward on their perilous journey to freedom, they were haunted by the specter of their pursuers. Every rustle in the underbrush, every shadow cast by the moonlight, sent shivers down their spines, a constant reminder of the dangers that lurked just beyond the edge of their vision. With each passing day, the bounty on their heads grew larger, drawing ever more ruthless bounty hunters and slave catchers into their pursuit. They moved under the cover of darkness, their senses sharpened by the adrenaline-fueled fear that gripped them, yet, amidst the ever-present threat of capture, Solomon and his companions found strength in each other's presence. Their bond, forged in the crucible of suffering, served as a beacon of hope in the darkest of nights, guiding them ever onward towards the promise of freedom that lay just beyond the horizon. And though their journey was fraught with peril, Solomon refused to let fear dictate their actions. With each passing mile, he drew upon the reserves of courage and determination that had carried him through the darkest days of slavery, his eyes fixed firmly on the prize that awaited them at journey's end. For he knew that no matter the obstacles they faced, no matter the trials that lay ahead, they would never stop fighting for the chance to reclaim their stolen dignity and live a life of freedom, free from the shadows of oppression that had haunted them for far too long. As Solomon and his companions continued their arduous journey towards freedom, they clung to the flickering flame of hope that burned within their hearts. Despite the ever-present dangers that lurked around every corner, they refused to surrender to despair, knowing that as long as they drew breath, there remained the possibility of redemption. Along the way, they encountered kind strangers who offered them shelter and sustenance, their generosity a glimmer of light in the vast expanse of darkness that surrounded them. These acts of kindness served as a reminder that even in the bleakest of times, there was still goodness to be found in the world. And though the road ahead was long and treacherous, Solomon and his companions pressed on, their spirits buoyed by the promise of freedom that beckoned them from afar. For they knew that no matter the obstacles they faced, no matter the trials that lay ahead, they would never stop fighting for the chance to live a life of dignity and self-determination, free from the chains of oppression that had bound them for far too long. And so, with each step they took, they drew closer to the elusive promise of freedom that had eluded them for so long, their hearts filled with hope and their spirits ablaze with the fire of defiance. For they knew that no matter the challenges they faced, no matter the sacrifices they had to make, they would emerge triumphant in the end, their spirits unbroken and their resolve unwavering. As Solomon and his companions reached the final stretch of their journey, they were met with one last, formidable obstacle. The border between slavery and freedom loomed large before them, guarded by patrols and watchful eyes that sought to thwart their escape, but Solomon refused to be deterred. With the courage born of desperation, he led his companions through the wilderness, navigating the treacherous terrain with a sense of purpose that burned brighter than ever before. And then, at long last, they reached the border, the threshold between bondage and liberty, between despair and hope. With bated breath and pounding hearts, they crossed over into freedom, their spirits soaring as they left the shadows of slavery behind them. As they stood on the other side, bathed in the warm glow of the sun, Solomon and his companions knew that they had achieved the impossible. Against all odds, they had triumphed over oppression, their indomitable spirit carrying them through the darkest of nights to the dawn of a new day. And though their journey had been long and fraught with peril, they emerged from the crucible of suffering stronger and more resilient than ever before. For they knew that no matter the trials they faced, no matter the challenges that lay ahead, they would never stop fighting for the chance to live a life of dignity and freedom, their spirits forever unbroken and their hearts forever free.